my name is Soraya. I'm a writer and artist and sustainability professional. I'm founder of All the Elements, which is a community designed to support those who are looking to create change on diversity in the UK outdoors. And I also work as operations manager for Expedition, and we do all women's sailing voyages looking at plastics and toxics in the ocean. I am based in Hampshire in the UK.
I'd love to know a little bit more about what your early life was like. Were you adventurous? Were you sporty? Did you spend time in the outdoors?
I've done a couple of interviews with people recently, which have helped me really delve into my experience of childhood and how that might have shaped my connection with the outdoors. And what's interesting is the more I think about it, the more time I realize I did spend outdoors as a child. Although I feel like I spent loads of time inside reading Enid Blyton novels. That was like what I remember. But actually, from when I was really, really small, my mum's side of the family in particular are really outdoorsy. My granddad was a keen twitcher. So we would quite regularly go outside to the woods, which were just down the road from his house. And we would go to the beach regularly. And so I was very lucky. I was very immersed in the outdoors. I was also absolutely horse obsessed, like absolutely obsessed. And I started riding when I was 5. And so I would spend quite a lot of time outside hanging out with horses. As anyone who's horsey knows, you spend you spend more time on the ground with them doing horse related chores than you do actually riding them. So I've had spent a lot of time in nature as a child, which is amazing, and I'm incredibly grateful for it.
Are you still horse obsessed?
I am still horse obsessed, but basically, actually what happened was I went to uni, I studied law, and I absolutely hated it. I hated every second of it. I think you're either a law person or you're not a law person, and I'm definitely not a law person. I learned a lot from it though, and I took those skills forward. But when I left uni, I was like, I don't want to do anything to do with law. And my first job was at an equine hospital. And then my second job was actually as a writer for Horse and Rider magazine. So I was fully immersed in horses for a very long time. And that was just before I left that job and decided to kind of pivot my career into sustainability. And then when I did that, I decided to take a bit of a break from horses. It's very expensive to have horses anywhere. It's expensive to have horses, but it's particularly expensive to have horses in the southeast. So I have taken up lots of other outdoor activities, but that doesn't mean I still don't get that urge. I'm like, oh, it's such a crisp, lovely day. I would just love to be going out on a ride today.
You said that you did a pivot in your career more towards sustainability. What brought that change about?
I think it was because I was working at the magazine and it was really and truly my dream job. Like it really was my dream job. And I had to pinch myself some days because I would think, I can't believe I'm getting paid to interview Olympians and go to these amazing yards and do all these amazing things. But after a while, I realized I wasn't happy, and I just couldn't work out why that was. Like, why was I not happy in this dream job? And it came down to purpose, but that's not how that, obviously I didn't realize it like that. So what I did was I was like, when I was a child, what did I want to be? What did I want to do? And I realized I wanted to work in kind of conservation type things when I was a child. And then I looked at what the current conversation was around conservation, and discovered that everything was linked to sustainability. And by that point, I had writing experience, I had business experience. So I decided to take those skills and study sustainability for businesses and kind of head down that route. Like, how could I create more good in the world, which seems really worthy. But as I just said, it was driven by the fact that I wasn't very happy. So actually, it was also selfish.
Yeah, but it can be so. I always think it's interesting when you've got something which is entitled like the dream job or, people can look at your life and be like, oh my gosh, she's so lucky, interviewing these Olympians and getting to write about her passion. But then when you look inside you and you just think, oh, I'm not happy. And then you've got to figure out what to do about it and to actually make that change. So you started delving back into your childhood and figuring out your purpose and coming along onto sort of conservation and sustainability. What does sustainability mean to you?
This is a great question. And actually, when I was doing my my MBA, it was the One Planet MBA, so it was in partnership with the WWF, which is really, really cool. But we used to laugh at the question of sustainability because it was one of those things that comes up all the time. What does it really mean? And the definition is meeting the needs of the present while not compromising the needs of the future. And I think I do believe that, but what does that encompass? I think is a really important question. And for me, it encompasses environmental issues, obviously, but it also encompasses social issues. Like you can't tackle one without the other. It has to be a holistic approach. Otherwise, we're not going to create large scale change, long lasting change. We just can't.
Yeah. A lot of the women that I speak to on this podcast, we focus a lot on sort of, adventure, exploration, traveling, exploring. What are your thoughts on adventure and sustainability, and how do they mix or gel?
So I think this is another really great question. You're asking lots of very great questions.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. Adventure and sustainability is a really interesting thing, and it's something that I've looked into and been thinking about a lot over the past few years since I kind of joined the adventure community, probably about 6 years ago or so. And I think for me, adventure has to have a purpose behind it. There has to be a reason. Everything is about compromise. If we were going to talk about sustainable travel in the truest sense, then none of us would leave our houses because it's, every single thing you do has an impact. So for me, if I'm looking at what people are doing and what their adventures look like and what their aims are, it's important to me to really truly understand, like, why are we going to these places? What are we doing when we're there? How are we communicating what we're seeing? And just how is it a net positive is kind of the question. And I want to kind of also say within that, like, I'm not a perfect human being, and I've definitely done trips that are definitely not sustainable in any sense and don't bring about any good in the world. And I think it's a journey that we're all on, where you have to make compromises. You have to choose the issues that are the most important to you and make the compromises that you can make to create a positive net end, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well.
You are.
And okay, good. But I think what it's also come very much to the forefront for me in the last year, because I was given an award actually around sustainable travel, which is something which I do think is a little bit of an oxymoron. But a lot of that was also related to the fact that you can do a lot of adventures locally, and you can do travel that has lower impact. And maybe what we need to do, people are not going to stop traveling. Maybe what we need to do is reassess that focus, and also not demonize the people who haven't traveled anywhere and are now just starting to go on their adventures and just starting to travel, and say, oh, well, now I realize all the things that I've done wrong in the past, and therefore nobody should do what I've done. I think that's very easy to say when you've already been to all the places and seen all of the things.
You mentioned that you sort of got involved with the adventure community 6 years ago. How did that happen for you?
I've been wondering about this recently, actually, and it started because my mum, who knows me very, very well, had previously handed me a book written by Ben Keane called Tribe Wanted. And for those of you who don't know Ben's story, he basically put an advert in a paper saying, join us, I think it was join me or join us. And he had lots of people apply, and then he went and set up this sustainable community, basically setting up a sustainable tourism project with local people in Fiji, I think the first one was. And I remember just being so inspired by it. And then in the turning point in my life where I decided to kind of move away from, I didn't completely leave writing about horses behind, like I still do it sometimes. But when I decided to kind of pivot my career, I also saw that Ben was starting a book club, Rebel Book Club. And I'm a massive Ben Keane fangirl. And I was like, God, that sounds great. So I joined. And as part of that community and meeting more people within that community, I think I then met people who were also connected with the Yes Tribe. And then once I started doing a bit more with them, I met people who were also connected with the Love Her Wild community. And then from there, it's like, it's all interconnected, isn't it? And then from there, I met James, who runs Adventure Uncovered. And so, yeah, so I've started like crossing all of those communities. Also, Explore at the RGS is like my favorite adventure event of all time. It's just such an incredible, it's just an incredible event for anyone who wants to get started on expeditions and work out what they might do with that expedition. Like how can you collect science, but also how can you cross borders? Find out all of those things.
I love how just taking the first step, seeing an advertisement, reading a book, getting connected to Tribe Wanted, and then the Yes Tribe, and then Love Her Wild, and then Adventure Uncovered, and then Explore RGS. It just builds these sort of layers and connections and opens doors, and you find out about opportunities, or you find out about adventures and expeditions which sometimes you just never heard about, and you're just like, wow, that's a thing. People can actually do that. I didn't, the same thing happened for me. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was an option. What was your first adventure, your first expedition?
Ooh. So I guess that depends on your definition of adventure, which I'm sure is something that people say a lot. I first started traveling on my own without family or friends in, I think, 2016. And the first thing I did actually was a Rebel Book Club related event. I went to a trip to the Sahara Desert, and we did a journey overland to get there. And it was quite a short, in the scheme of things, quite a short journey, but it was just incredible to be with like-minded strangers on this traveling journey overland. So that was amazing. And then the first one, what I would consider to be like my bigger adventure, was when I went canoeing on the Mississippi with Dave Cornthwaite and Emily Penn. And a group of really cool people who all joined for that trip as well. And we canoed and we camped on these sandbars that hadn't had any humans on them since the high waters, and we didn't see any other people for days. And it felt like the purest version of myself. And I think I realized that I wanted more of the wildness and the connection to nature and the adventure, but with other people. Like, I feel I'm a very independent person. I live on my own. I do lots of things on my own. But when I travel, I like to have shared experiences. So that's kind of one of the things that I look for when I do expeditions. And since then, I've done whale shark conservation trips. I've done sailing with X Expedition. I've done sailing with Sail Britain. The whale shark trip was with Love Her Wild. So yeah, like lots of different experiences in different places, but with like-minded people.
Reflecting back on your sort of early adventures, your solo travel canoeing on the Mississippi, with with Emily and other similar-minded people. What were the lessons learned from those experiences that helped you moving forward with the direction of your life?
I think every single thing that I do, I realize that things are possible that you don't think are possible, whether that's physical, mostly actually, whether it's like overcoming mental challenges. And every time I do something new, I lose the fear of doing the next thing. And I'm not scared anymore. Like, there are practical challenges. Like, if you want to, I'm thinking about doing a different type of slow travel expedition in the next couple of years, depending on what happens with COVID and borders and life. And there are some very real practical challenges to doing that, but I'm not scared about doing it. I think that's the thing. Like, I just don't get the fear anymore. I'm more scared about doing interviews like this than I am about taking myself off on my own to go on an expedition with strangers doing an activity that I probably don't know much about. I mean, when I went canoeing on the Mississippi, I had never canoed before. When I did the whale shark conservation, I had never really snorkeled. Like, I'd done a bit of snorkeling, but not really. And that was quite a major part of that trip. When I did my first microplastics sailing expedition, I'd never been sailing before. And I think it just teaches you that it's going to be fine. And actually, I find it more fun when you're a beginner. I enjoy that steep learning curve at the start and the unknown. So yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about the Sail Britain voyage. What was involved? What was that experience like?
The Sail Britain voyage was around the south coast. We actually went out of Falmouth and we did quite a bit of what feels like now it went on for days and days and days of sailing, because when you're sailing you move so slowly. It was crazy, but everything is happening, like, can be happening so fast. And we collected samples for a university, I think it was the University of Exeter study. This was a while ago now. And we had two scientists on board who were collecting those samples, but we helped with the trawling and got involved with that. But also, as anyone who's been on a boat knows, in any type of expedition, it's all about mucking in and doing all of the chores that are related to being on board as well. So it was an amazing immersive experience. I really enjoyed seeing the UK from the sea. It's just completely different. Like, seeing those seaside towns from where for however many years boats have been coming in, and seeing these like beautiful seaside towns battered by the winds and still there and just looking beautiful and wonderful. Yeah, I don't know, something magic about it.
What's your role? You're joining a team, you don't necessarily know who the other people are. Do you have a certain role that you end up falling into, that you focus on, that you prefer doing?
So I am very much I will do whatever needs to be done in order to get us to where we need to be. because of that, I've taken different roles on different trips. I can be the person who's running around passing people stuff. I'm perfectly happy doing that if that means we get what we need to get done. I have also taken more of a leadership role. Once I snap into work mode, I'm very organized. So I also am very good at putting systems in place if we need systems. But I've also sometimes been like the artist and the writer and the creator, and that's an incredibly freeing role to take on an expedition as well. So it's varies. I'm happy to flex according to the need.
Yeah. Tell me more about your art, because I know that you can combine it with the expeditions and your blogging and the work that you're doing now. Have you always been sort of creative and artistic, and what type of art do you do?
So I have not always been artistic. I have always been creative, but I was terrible at art at school. Like, I was so bad at it. And when I started sketching a bit more as an adult, I remember sending a picture of a sketch that I'd done to my sister, and she genuinely didn't believe that I'd done it. because my artwork has always been so bad up to that point. I have always done things like I used to do silversmithing. I've done bookbinding courses. Me and my mum, we do creative courses together. I've done clay sculpture, leatherworking, like all sorts of things like that. So I have always been creative, and I've always been a writer since I was really, really young. But the art, in terms of painting and drawing, probably only started, 4 or 5 years ago. And I've always wanted to be that person who could paint and draw. And what I've discovered is that it's actually, like, I don't know, there is obviously some sort of talent involved, but the level of talent compared to the level of just dedicating and practicing, it's much more about practice and much more about working out what you like and what you don't like, and what materials you like and what materials you don't like, and how you want to reflect your environment, than it actually is about like a innate ability to draw, if that makes sense. And I'd started drawing. So that actually dates it. So I'd started my classes just before I went canoeing on the Mississippi. And when I went canoeing, John Ruskey, who runs the Quapaw Canoe Company, is an artist, and he gets up every morning and he paints the sunrise. And I one day went and sat with him and said, do you mind if I just watch you? And he handed me some pencils. And it's like one of those stories that you're like, did that actually happen? But it genuinely happened to me. He handed me pencils and I started drawing the sunrise, and I just got this whole new appreciation of drawing on expedition and drawing in place and capturing a feeling of a place, even if the work that you're doing doesn't look anything like what you're looking at. I can talk about art and art practice all day long, and writing practice all day long. Like, the creative process is something that absolutely fascinates me, and it also just makes me really happy.
Yeah, it's nice to talk about things that make people joyful and smile, and especially with art, I think sometimes, like you shared, it's about the enjoyment of the process and the enjoyment of creating, even if what you produce doesn't necessarily look like what you were drawing. It's more for you and creating those memories and feelings while you were out on expedition. In 2018, you headed over to Vancouver. Do you want to share a little bit more what you were doing in Vancouver?
Yeah, so we did a sail, and it was an X-Expedition sail. I've been involved with X-Expedition since end of 2016. So at the time, and still now, I was working for them, but I wasn't on board as someone who was working for X-Expedition. I was on board as a multidisciplinary crew member, and we sailed from Vancouver via the Broken Islands to Seattle, looking at the impact of plastic pollution. on uninhabited islands and in the surrounding waters, and also discussing on board with the crew members who came from all different places in the world about what the challenges to plastic, the challenges to tackling plastic in our own communities were, and how we could apply our personal skills to create change. And it was an amazing experience, and the women on board were incredible, and you get something different from all women expeditions, not necessarily expeditions, than you do from mixed expeditions. And mixed expeditions are great, don't get me wrong. I think they bring something else as well, but it has a different feel to it.
There is just something very powerful about women all getting together and especially sharing their knowledge and experiences. And with regards to plastic pollution, what for you were the key takeaways? What were the lessons that you thought, right, this is what I need to do, this is how I want to help to drive change in this area?
So I think my experience on board was slightly different because I was already working in the space and already had a clear idea how I could apply my skills to create change. So, I mean, I was already very aware of the challenges we have with microplastics. And actually, 2018, it was still not as big a topic as it is now. It was bigger than when I started in 2016, where people would just look at me very confused as to what I was talking about. But it still wasn't as big a topic. So there was still a lot of communication to do around it. And I did a fair amount of that because communication is one of my key skills. But coming away from that experience with personal stories of being able to explain what it was like trying to pick up polystyrene, tiny balls of polystyrene from an uninhabited island, and how overwhelming that felt, as of it being this one cove on one island, and how it was impossible for us to even clean that up, and knowing the damage that those bits could do was crazy, and just drove me forward to continue doing what we were doing, which is, my skill set is, as I said before, communication. It's also community building, and it's also organization of things. And so moving forward, organizing more trips, bringing together more amazing women as part of our amazing team. Like, we have a really fantastic team. That was my way of creating change on plastic specifically.
Sometimes I get the impression, or I certainly feel this way, that with plastics, it's almost this feeling of overwhelm. Like, there's just so much plastic pollution, there's just so much damage being done. And I don't know if you've ever felt, like that helpless feeling, like, well, what can I do? How do you stop yourself from feeling helpless? How do you stop yourself from either feeling overwhelmed by the size of the problem?
Yeah, I don't think you ever fully get away from that. So I remember I have never felt as overwhelmed as the very first time, like the very first day of my sustainability course. We were shown videos of albatross on Midway Island, and albatross chicks like throwing, dying from the plastic in their stomachs, starving to death. And that was like one issue that we very briefly touched on that day. And then you take the lid off it. And actually, if you're looking at sustainability for businesses, the complexities that lead into all of these different factors, including plastic, like plastic is one of the world's challenges right now. I have never felt as overwhelmed as I felt on that day. But my personality type is very much about breaking things down into chunks. And that is how I work through all of these things. And it's the same as I felt when the Black Lives Matter movement happened last year. very similar, very overwhelming, huge challenges for us to overcome. But how can we break it down into smaller actions that are then going to build up into being a bigger thing? And I've had a few people ask over the years about, how can we create change? How can we create a better planet? How can we do all these things? And I'm in no way an expert, but my general rule is to pick a few things that are your things that you make decisions on. So, what are you most passionate about? And focus on those things. And someone else, if everyone focused on the things that they were most passionate about, then somebody else will have the other thing that you're concerned about, but you can't tackle right now and isn't your deepest passion. So will work on my 5 things, you work on your 5 things. And if we all do that and we do it like flat out, do our best, work our hardest, look at the things we buy and go, well, actually, I'm more worried about it having animal products than I am about it being plastic, for example, because that's a decision that has to be made like a lot. Or I am more concerned about how this gives to homeless charities than I am about whether it's locally sourced. And like all of those decisions you have to make all day long, and they are massively overwhelming. But if you have like your 5 things that you can be like, okay, I will choose that over that, then at least we are all, if every purchase you do makes a positive impact, then at least we are doing good overall. Whereas if we're not making those informed decisions and we're not taking those choices, we might be buying things or doing things that do no good and create no positive impact. And then that's just, I think, a waste. It's a loss, isn't it? When we could be doing more.
Yeah. That gives me comfort, because sometimes I'm very clear with like what my mission is, what I'm doing. I want to increase the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and big physical challenges and getting outdoors. And then sometimes you sort of look around at the world and you're just like, oh my God, there's just so many problems, and then overwhelmed, and then you think it's too much, and then you don't end up doing anything. So I think when the way that you shared that, it makes me think, do you know what, it is a team effort. I'm going to focus on, my passion, my interest, do the best that I can in this tiny little area for women, and know that other women and men outside of that are doing their own thing, following their own passions. And at the beginning of our conversation, you shared about all the elements. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what it is and what it's doing, what its purpose is.
All the Elements is quite a new project, which was officially set up in August last year, 2020. And what happened was, I talk a lot about, or I have previously over the years talked a lot about equality, particularly equality for women. And my specialist subject was authentic leadership for women, coming out of my sustainability course. And I bang on about role modeling a lot. And I suddenly realized when Black Lives Matter happened, and I saw a lot of people in the adventure community and outdoor communities saying, oh, I just don't see representation, and I don't see anyone anywhere from any of these communities doing anything. So I don't know how I can amplify their voices when they're not there to amplify. And as part of this bigger, very difficult process to go through with Black Lives Matter, I was so angry, and then did a bit of reflection, because I was like, they are out there. I see them. I see people doing it. I'm out there doing stuff in the outdoors. We exist. Why are we not being represented? And why are we so unseen? So first step was like, what can I do personally? Well, what I can do personally is I can step into the light. And I hate sharing photos of myself. I've never really been one to like put myself in the spotlight to do interviews or anything like that. Like, I have always just been very happy just to be doing my thing and just living my life, but telling everyone else that they need to step up and create change is what I realized I'd been doing. So I committed to share more of me publicly. And then I thought, what would be really great is if there was a central place where I could talk to other people who were also doing this and learn from other people about all the other different areas of diversity, and how can we support people with disabilities? How can we support different gender identities? How can we look at different body types? There are so many different aspects to diversity, and I wanted to know more about them. So I looked, and then I discovered that cross diversity community didn't exist. And I wanted it. And I thought, why don't I test this and see whether anyone else wants it? Like, let's put it out there. Let's start something, and let's see if people want to come together and learn from each other and have these conversations and feel supported. So that's what All the Elements is. It also has a directory on the website, which is constantly growing as there are so many groups doing amazing things. It has a resources section where you can find research, but also articles that have been written about groups and interviews with people and opinion pieces on why we need to create change and podcasts and films. And it just is, it brings everyone together who's working in the space, and hopefully can also be used as a educational resource to help people find out more about it. Because I tell you what, we are out there. And so how we can work on amplifying that, and then that will help with the other barriers, because one of the barriers is a lack of role models. Well, if the people are out there and their voices aren't being amplified, then how can we share that other people and other types of people can be outdoors too? So yeah, I think, I mean, there's so many different aspects to it. If anyone's interested, you need to check out the website and have a little look around. And I'm keen for collaborating with different groups, and that's one of my things. Is I don't want to duplicate effort, so I'm working with lots of different individuals and people to build different parts of All the Elements based around their passion areas and their experience areas to kind of make it this central hub.
How have you found it sharing more of yourself, putting yourself out there? How's that process been for you and your, I suppose, emotional well-being, mental health, everything that goes into being online and sharing your story?
Uncomfortable. I think that it is another thing that gets easier with time. And I have been incredibly lucky because I am supported by an amazing community of people that I already knew before I decided to put myself out there, who are working in the space, and also my amazing growing network of people who continue to inspire me every day with what they're doing. And that helps, because when you are putting yourself out there, it does feel raw and it is difficult, but it's important. And I can't, in good conscience, talk about creating change and the importance of sharing stories and vulnerabilities if I don't do it. So, yeah.
You've taken on a new project, I think, with your mum and your dog Rory. I'd love you to share a little bit more about that project and what it is.
Yeah, so in our this is actually something we were going to do before COVID, but COVID helped us like really put it forward on the agenda. So my mum has always wanted to walk the southwest coast path, And I love walking and my dog loves walking. So we made a pact that we would start doing it in small sections though. Like it's very manageable to do for us in small sections. So we've started with the Dorset coast, which is not very far from where I live. It's probably about an hour and a half to reach most of it. So we're doing those sections. We have done a couple of sections just on day trips, and we're going to work our way around. So I'm excited. Like I've always loved the Southwest, and the coastline is beautiful, and I love doing it with my mum and just being able to spend time outside with my mum and my dog, who is like, he's almost 13 now. So it's great to have this experience with him, and he loves going to new places. He is, when people say dogs love routine, my dog does not love routine.
Oh, it sounds super fun and just a very relaxing thing to do. Like just take it, small sections at a time, walk with your mum, walk with your dog. There's no rush, just, as and when you can fit it in, when it's safe, when it's, it's right to walk. And where's the best place for people to follow along with your walking, your adventures, with all the elements? Where should they find you on social media?
So on all the social media channels, I am Soraya Earth, and my website is www.soraya.earth. And then if anyone is specifically interested in all the elements, it's all the elements as one word _ on the social channels on Twitter and Instagram, and it is alltheelements.co is the website. So lots of places where people can find out more information.
Fantastic. And Soraya, I'd love for you to leave our listeners with your final words of advice for other women who want to get outdoors more, want to adventure more, but adventure with a purpose and want to be more sustainable. What would be your top tips and advice?
I think it would be to work out what is important to you and what really attracts you as a challenge, and then tying that into what we talked about earlier about what is your purpose and what is your drive, and to not worry about what other people are doing, and don't be influenced about what you think seems like an adventure, because some of those sections in Dorset of the coast path with the hills and the weather and all of the other things that are going on, I tell you what, that felt like sometimes like more of an adventure than some of my more, what I would consider to be in more extreme places. And it's personal to you. So work out what's important to you, and don't let anyone else influence it.
Absolutely. Soraya, thank you so much for coming on Tough Girl Podcast and sharing more about your passions and interests. It's been amazing to speak with you.
Thank you.
Hey Tribe, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Soraya. What an absolute inspiration. Now, I would highly recommend that you do go and check out alltheelements.co. It's an incredible website. There's a huge amount of resources available on there. There's an incredibly detailed directory as well. And, just to highlight what Soraya was talking about, the UK outdoors definitely does have a diversity problem. Large segments of our population are underrepresented, underpromoted, and undersupported in our outdoor spaces. And this needs to change. The good news is that there are individuals, community groups, and organisations working to create change. All of the Elements is that community. So please do go check out alltheelements.co. And everything that we have talked about today will be available in the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com. For those of you who are brand new to the Tough Girl Podcast, my name is Sarah Williams. I'm the host of the Tough Girl Podcast and the founder of Tough Girl Challenges, which is all about motivating and inspiring women and girls, but also helping to increase the amount of female role models in the media. New episodes of the Tough Girl Podcast go live every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. at UK time. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. There is a huge amount of episodes for you to listen to. There is a massive back catalogue. I haven't quite done my numbering right, so at the moment this episode number is around 369. However, because I haven't included the Tough Girl Extra as numbered episodes, there's possibly more like 400 or 500 episodes available for you to listen to, and that's including 7 Women's 7 Challenges, which we did in 2017. Tough Girl Extra, which is when I go back and speak with previous guests to see what they've been up to since we last spoke to them. So, for example, back in April, we caught up with Sasha Dench, who is an award-winning conservationist. She's an adventurer and a UN ambassador for migratory species. And Sasha's sharing more about her latest challenge, which is around Great Britain Climate Challenge. We also did a wonderful, it was actually a live video edition of the Tough Girl podcast featuring the one and only Rosie Swale Pope, who's just an incredible legend. You can listen to that on the Tough Girl Extra episode. We've also caught up with Alex Mason, a thru hiker turned ocean rower who rode the Atlantic Ocean in January 2020. We've spoken with Nikki Spinks twice, Carolyn Bottarelli, Arita Bojans, Janie McGill, Alice Morrison, Molly Hughes, who at 29 became the youngest woman to ski from Hercules Inlet in Western Antarctica to the South Pole. So well worth checking out all of the episodes. It's an incredible resource. So please do tell one friend about the Tough Girl podcast. Now, the Tough Girl podcast would not be around without the support of the patrons, and there's around 280 patrons supporting the Tough Girl podcast. So a massive thank you to everybody who's stepped up, who's taken the time to visit patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast and sign up as a patron. You can sign up in sterling, euros, and US dollars. There's a monthly option and there is an annual option as well. So you can just make a one-off payment. So because you are getting 100 plus episodes a year with extra bonus episodes coming out on the Tough Girl podcast anniversary, which is the 4th of August. So 4th of August 2021 will be the 6-year anniversary of the Tough Girl podcast, and I will be releasing 4 brand new episodes on that day. So there is a huge amount of resource available at toughgirlchallenges.com. Please do go check it out, and thank you again for listening, and thank you for telling a friend. Thank you for writing a review. Thank you for sharing on social media. I really do appreciate you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon.